April 18, 1943. Over the dark blue waters off Cape Bon, Tunisia, Allied radar screens flicker alive as more than 100 German transport aircraft, Junkers Ju-52s packed with men and supplies, race for Rommel's Africa Corps. Moments later, Curtiss P-40 Warhawks slash down from the sun. In less than half an hour, the rugged American fighters and their Spitfire escorts leave the sea littered with burning wreckage. Nearly the entire German convoy destroyed. This epic clash, later known as the Palm Sunday Massacre, was only one chapter in the astonishing combat record of the P-40. From Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, from the jungles of Burma to the deserts of North Africa, Warhawk pilots shot down thousands of enemy aircraft, strafed columns, and held the line when the Allies had few other fighters ready for war. Though slower and lower climbing than later legends like the P-51 Mustang, the P-40's heavy guns, rugged frame, and fearless crews made it the workhorse of the early air war, buying precious time for victory. The Warhawk story begins years earlier, in the cautious days before America entered the conflict. In the mid-1930s, the Curtiss Aircraft Company built its reputation on a family of fighters known as the Hawk Line. The P-36 Hawk was a fast, clean monoplane powered by a radial engine. Yet by 1937, aviation was moving so quickly that even this modern design risked obsolescence. Curtiss engineers took a bold step. They married the P-36's proven airframe to the new liquid-cooled Allison V1710 engine. The result was the XP-40 prototype, sleeker and faster than anything the U.S. Army Air Corps had yet fielded. Early test flights showed speeds over 340 miles per hour, respectable numbers at a time when most military planners still believed America's oceans made a high-altitude bomber threat unlikely. The Army ordered the new fighter into production as the P-40 Warhawk. Early versions were lightly armed with only 250 caliber machine guns, but lessons from Europe's rapidly expanding war demanded more firepower. Engineers reinforced the wings and eventually gave combat models 6 heavy Brownings. They also added bomb racks and later even rockets, turning the P-40 into a potent low-level attack aircraft. It was never intended to duel at 30,000 feet. U.S. doctrine imagined the next war as a coastal defense fight in which fighters would protect beaches and harbors. What mattered was rugged construction, range at medium altitude, and the ability to take hits from rifles and anti-aircraft guns and keep flying. In these qualities, the Warhawk excelled. By 1941, the world had changed faster than doctrine. Germany's Blitzkrieg and Japan's imperial expansion proved that long-range bombers and carrier strikes were no fantasy. New American designs like the twin-engine Lockheed P-38 Lightning and the giant Republic P-47 Thunderbolt were still on drawing boards or trickling from factories. In quantity, the United States had only 2 modern single-engine fighters ready for combat: the Bell P-39 Airacobra and the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. These planes would have to hold the line until something better arrived. As tensions with Japan mounted, Washington began to push its newest fighters forward. In mid-1941, squadrons of P-40s were ferried to the Philippine Islands to strengthen the archipelago's air defenses. Others were sent to Hawaii, Alaska, and the Panama Canal Zone. President Franklin Roosevelt also authorized the covert shipment of P-40s to China, where retired U.S. Airman Claire Chennault was quietly assembling a group of volunteer American pilots, the unit that would become famous as the Flying Tigers. By the autumn of 1941, the P-40 had become the most widely deployed modern fighter in American service. Then came the shock of December 7, 1941. Japanese carrier planes roared over Oahu at dawn, and the Warhawks of the 15th and 18th Pursuit Groups were caught wingtip to wingtip on the ground at Wheeler and Hickam Fields. Despite the chaos, a handful of pilots scrambled. Lieutenants George Welch and Kenneth Taylor managed to get airborne and, in desperate dogfights, shot down 4 attackers between them. Their courage provided some of the first American air victories of the Pacific War and proved that even when surprised, the Warhawk could fight back fiercely. The next day, Japan struck the Philippines. Contrary to the long-standing myth that American planes were destroyed before they could move, Many P-40 pilots had been on alert for weeks and scrambled immediately when radar picked up incoming formations. They flew repeated patrols and interceptions through tropical haze and punishing humidity. But luck and logistics favored the enemy. Some fighters were lost when their brand-new Allison engines seized from lack of break-in time. Others ran out of fuel after hours of fruitless hunting over the open sea. When Japanese bombers finally reached Clark Field at midday on December 8th, only a single flight of 4 P-40s was airborne. Lieutenant Randall Keeter became the first American pilot in the Pacific to shoot down an enemy plane that day, but on the ground, 14 other Warhawks were destroyed in minutes by a perfectly timed bomb run. Despite such disasters, the P-40s that survived fought savagely. They dove on Japanese formations at treetop height, using their rugged airframes and heavy guns to deadly effect. Pilots like Boyd Wagner, Grant Mahoney, and William Dias launched audacious low-level strikes on enemy airfields and shipping. Wagner became America's first ace of the war. Dias led the final American air attack on Japanese ships in Subic Bay before the fall of Bataan. Many of these aviators would endure captivity, and some would escape through jungle and sea to fight again. Their stories and the P-40 ICs they flew proved that early American defeats owed more to circumstance than to any lack of courage or capability. By the first months of 1942, the Curtiss Warhawk had already etched itself into aviation legend. From the smoke over Pearl Harbor to the battered runways of Luzon, it had faced the best the Japanese Empire could send and shown it could survive, strike, and return. And far away in the rugged hills of southwest China, another drama was beginning, one that would make the P-40's shark-toothed profile famous around the world. Far from the burning runways of Hawaii and the Philippines, another drama had been building long before Japan's December attacks. In 1937, retired U.S. Army Captain Claire Chennault arrived in China as an air advisor to Chiang Kai-shek. He found a nation reeling under relentless Japanese bombing and virtually without modern fighters. Chennault studied Japanese tactics in real combat, charted their weaknesses, and quietly proposed an audacious plan. Bring in American pilots as civilian volunteers, arm them with fast American fighters, and teach tactics designed to exploit those weaknesses. By mid-1941, President Roosevelt had quietly approved the idea. 100 P-40s, diverted from an export order to Sweden, were shipped to China, and a band of adventurous U.S. pilots and mechanics, officially discharged from the Army, Navy, or Marines, signed one-year contracts. They called themselves the American Volunteer Group, but the world would know them as the Flying Tigers. Chennault drilled his recruits hard. He understood that the Warhawk could not outclimb or outturn the nimble Japanese Zero. Instead, he built doctrine around the P-40's strengths: superior diving speed, rugged construction, and heavy .50 caliber firepower. He paired fighters in two-ship elements that attacked from altitude, struck in a high-speed pass, and then climbed back into the sun to strike again. When war came on December 20th, 1941, AVG pilots intercepted a Japanese bomber formation bound for Kunming and scattered it in flames. 3 days later, over Rangoon, they repeated the feat, downing dozens of enemy aircraft in a single day. Through the spring of 1942, these volunteers destroyed more than 280 Japanese planes while losing only a fraction of their own, an extraordinary record that electrified a world hungry for Allied victories and made the P-40's shark-toothed nose art an enduring symbol of defiance. As the AVG fought in China and Burma, the Japanese thrust southward toward the oil riches of the Netherlands, East Indies, and the Australian continent itself. Australia suddenly faced the real prospect of invasion. Northern ports like Darwin came under relentless attack. Here again, the Curtiss Warhawk, known to Australians as the Kitty Hawk, proved indispensable. U.S. Army pilots of the 49th Fighter Group and squadrons of the Royal Australian Air Force scrambled daily to meet bombers and escort Zeros. They quickly learned to use the P-40's strengths just as Chennault had: dive from altitude, fire heavy bursts, and climb away before the more agile Japanese fighters could react. On August 23, 1942, 49th Group pilots shot down 15 Japanese aircraft in a single day, a stunning performance that ended the threat to Darwin and secured Australia as a base for the long New Guinea campaign. In the steaming jungles of Papua, Kitty Hawks again proved decisive. At Milne Bay, RAAF P-40s pounced on Japanese landing forces, blasting troops and landing craft, and helping turn back the first major Japanese amphibious assault ever repelled on land. By late 1942, the Warhawk was also carrying the Allied fight across the world to North Africa. The British had already been using Tomahawk and Kitty Hawk variants in the Western Desert, escorting bombers and strafing German supply lines, while Hurricanes and Spitfires handled high-altitude interception. American units soon joined them. In the summer and fall, the 57th Fighter Group trained with the Royal Air Force in Palestine before entering combat with the U.S. 9th Air Force. Their P-40 Doves dove on German columns, bombed airfields, and fought running battles over Egypt and Libya. When the Allies launched Operation Torch in November 1942, additional U.S. groups sailed west for Morocco and Algeria. Some P-40s even flew directly off escort carriers to newly captured airfields. An unprecedented feat for a single-engine land plane, though not without cost. Inexperienced pilots struggled with short runways and crosswinds. Several aircraft were lost before firing a shot. Despite these teething troubles, by early 1943, Curtiss P-40s were an everyday sight over the deserts of Tunisia, where Rommel's Afrika Korps made its last stand. The Warhawk's ability to take punishment and deliver heavy ordnance made it ideal for smashing truck convoys in frontline positions. It was in these skies, as winter turned to spring, that the stage was set for one of the most spectacular air ambushes of the entire war. The battle that history would remember as the Palm Sunday Massacre. April 18, 1943. Allied ground radar along the Tunisian coast detected a massive German airlift. More than 100 Junkers Ju-52 transports, laden with troops and supplies, escorted by Messerschmitt fighters, racing from Sicily to resupply Rommel's Afrika Korps. The mission was vital. Without those men and materiel, the Axis position in North Africa would collapse. Over the Mediterranean, the 57th and 324th Fighter Groups of the U.S. 9th Air Force, flying Curtiss P-40 Warhawks and covered above by British Spitfires, climbed silently into position. Just after midday, the American pilots rolled their fighters over and dove like hawks upon prey. 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns in each Warhawk spat fire, turning the Blue Sea into a killing ground. Transport after transport burst into flames or broke apart, some plunging straight into the water, others cartwheeled across the sky as desperate German paratroops leapt in vain. In less than 30 minutes, the P-40 Zeros and their escorts annihilated the convoy. Nearly 100 transports and 16 escorts destroyed for the loss of only 6 Warhawks and a single Spitfire. The Palm Sunday Massacre did more than end an airlift. It starved Rommel's army of critical reinforcements and hastened the Afrika Korps' surrender 3 weeks later. For the Warhawk, it was a signature triumph, proof that, when flown with skill and tactical discipline, the supposedly outclassed P-40 could dominate the sky. While North Africa celebrated victory, another hard campaign raged across Asia. In China and Burma, the Flying Tiger's successors, the U.S. 23rd Fighter Group and later the 14th Air Force, kept the P-40's fangs bared. Guided by Claire Chennault's hit-and-run doctrine, they hammered Japanese supply lines, strafed river traffic, and escorted bombers over the Himalayas. When Japanese forces surged into India's Arakan Valley in 1944, American and British commanders rushed P-40 units, including the battle-tested 33rd and 81st Fighter Groups, into action. Rugged, easy to service on primitive jungle strips, and able to dive at tremendous speed, the Warhawk remained a frontline weapon long after sleeker P-38 Lightnings and P-51 Mustangs appeared elsewhere. By 1944, however, aviation technology had leapt ahead. Twin-engine P-38s now ranged the Pacific, and long-legged P-51 Mustangs escorted bombers deep into enemy territory. U.S. units that once lived and died by the Warhawk began to re-equip, passing their veteran P-40 to allies such as the Royal Australian Air Force and the Royal New Zealand Air Force, who used them to the war's end. Even as newer fighters stole the headlines, Warhawks still thundered off coral runways in New Guinea and the Solomons, striking Japanese strongholds and protecting infantry in the slow, grinding island campaigns of 1944 and 1945. When final tallies were made, the Curtiss P-40 had served in every major theater of World War II. It fought in the defense of Hawaii and the desperate stand in the Philippines. It clawed the skies of China and Burma. It shielded Australia and New Guinea, and it helped strangle Rommel's supply lines from Egypt to Tunisia. Estimates credit Warhawk pilots with thousands of confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed and countless tons of enemy shipping and ground targets wrecked. The P-40 was never the fastest or the highest flying fighter, yet its very design, strong structure, heavy guns, and forgiving handling made it a pilot's friend. It could slug it out, absorb gunfire, and fly home, in the words of General George C. Kenney. In the dark early months of the war, when better planes were still on drawing boards, this reliability mattered more than speed. Even its silhouette became legendary. The snarling shark mouth, first painted by the Flying Tigers and copied by squadrons worldwide, turned the Warhawk into an icon of Allied resistance. Veterans remembered how enemy pilots sometimes broke off attacks at the mere sight of that fearsome grin. By the time victory was declared in 1945, faster aircraft like the Mustang and Thunderbolt dominated the headlines. Yet historians and combat pilots alike agree, without the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, the Allies might never have survived the war's opening years. From Pearl Harbor to Tunisia, from Burma to New Guinea, it was the rugged bridge that held the line until reinforcements could arrive. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was more than metal and machine guns. It was the courage of the men and women who flew and maintained it. Their skill and sacrifice turned a mid-1930s design into a weapon of global impact. If this journey through the Warhawk's battles inspired you, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories of the aircraft and airmen who shaped history. Which forgotten World War II fighter or campaign should we bring to life next? Your ideas help keep these stories alive.